Let's talk about how we decided the dimensions of these slats. They have a zigzag in them. That's part of the Greene and Greene style pattern, and it's called a cloud lift, in case you wanted to know. Now, we're using 1/8 for the slats, and a 1/8 is 7 1/4 inches wide. So we can't go wider. Let's take this particular slat to start with. We can't go more than 7 1/4 on the bottom, because that's the size of the board. And what I decided to do was to come in 1 inch on each of these indents here. So this would be 6 1/4. It's a lousy 6. And 5 1/4 up here. Okay. Now I want the next piece to be narrower, and to start with, and narrow at the top. Let's move this out a little bit so it's easier to look at. So we have this, all right? There we go. Okay. We have 2 offsets this way, so that's 2 inches. Okay. So the maximum this piece down here can be is 5 1/4. 7 1/4 minus 2. So this would be, for this slat, 5 1/4. Then we're going to go 4 1/4 and 3 1/4. So, and the other side is mirror image to this. So there'll be 2 of these, and there's also a little piece that comes up here like this, but we'll just lay it out and see what dimensions that has to be. So that's how we determine how big these pieces are, and I'm going to show you here in a second. We, in order to calculate and make sure this filled the whole gate across there, all the elements, I just made a little spreadsheet just to make the calculations easier, so if we want to try different widths, we can do so. But that's basically how I determined the width of these. Now, there is the other issue as to where to put these brakes, and let me show you how we did that. Now, that was just addition and subtraction, but I'm sorry, we're going to have to do a little algebra. The ancient Greeks determined that, they discovered that there's a particular ratio which looks good to the eye, and that ratio is 1.618 to 1. So roughly 1.6 to 1. The proportion is pleasing to the eyes, just the way our brains work. If you take one of your credit cards and measure it, you'll find out that that's the proportion, the long side to the short side, and it shows up all over the place. It's a very big thing with designers. This is called the golden ratio, or the golden section, it might be referred to. So just an FYI on it. If you were designing things and you were trying to determine how to break up pieces that are not all the same lengths, this is a good way to do it. The height of the slats is going to be, let me think a minute, I think it was 60, I'll just draw one side of it here. So we have the total height is 6 feet, so I'll just do it in inches. That's 72. So this is 72 inches tall. I came in 1 inch at the bottom and down, up 1 inch at the bottom and down 2 inches at the top. So we'll subtract 3 inches total from that. That's 69. We have 2 rails. They're 2x4, so they're 3.5 inches each. So total of 7. We'll take from that, and we got 62. And I, we'll show you this when we construct it. There's going to be a cleat that goes across here that there's going to be a little piece of wood that goes across there, a cleat, and the slats are going to stick into it. So I decided to do an inch on each of those. So I'll take another 2 off. So the total length of the slats is 60 inches. So get rid of this. So how do you calculate where to put those transitions? All right. So let's put that back. We have a total of 60 inches. We'll call this H. So we're going to have H. This is going to be 1.6 times H, so that's the next section in the golden section. So this will be 1.6 H. And this will be 1.6 H times 1.6 times 1.6 H. So it's going to be 1.6 squared H. So if you put that all together, we've got H plus 1.6 H plus 1.6 squared H. And if you take the H out, we've got 1 plus 1.6 plus, let me see what, can't remember off the top of my head what 1.6 squared was. I think it's 2.56, but let me just double check. I don't want to give you the wrong number here. Yep, 2.56. So that adds up to, used to be able to do this stuff in my head, but I can't do it in my head quick. 5.16. And you thought you'd never use algebra. See, your teacher was right. So 60 over 5.16 is equal to H, and that is about 12, I think. Let's see. Inverse times 60 equals. It's 11.85, so let's just call it 12. All right, just to make it easier. Okay. So this would be 12 inches. 1.6 H is, let's see, 17.2, I think. Oops. $19, I'm sorry. It's a little over 19. So we'll call it 19. And then the last one is going to be so that's going to be a little over, close to 30. 30.72 is 31. Let's see if this adds up to 60. We may have to adjust this a little bit. So that's going to be 11, 12, 62. So let's we'll have to adjust this a little bit. Let's make this. We'll make this 18. And we'll make this 30. So is that right? No, that's right. So that will tell us where to put these splits. If you decide to make a gate of a different height, that you could use that, or if you're going to just make the gate as I dimensioned it, just follow what I'm telling you. This is not critical to know, but I did want to show you how I got this. It just didn't come out of midair. You could also just take some paper and just keep cutting shapes until you were happy with the way it looked. That's fine too. This just saves some time. But if you hate math, that might be an easier way to do it. So that is how we arrived at the dimensions of those slats. Let's look at the, and you learned something about you learned something about ancient Greece. We've determined how wide those slats can be, so that's the one thing we need to know. The other thing we need to know is how far, what is the distance between the two stiles. So we know this is 48 inches. And these are 2x4s, so they're 3.5 inches each. So we'll take, which is 7 total. So that's going to give us 41. So the space we need to fill is 41 inches across. When I was designing the gate, determining the width of the slats, I was going over and over making, adding up numbers by hand and make sure that the pattern of the slats fit all the way across the space between the two stiles, so the width of the gate. So I got tired of doing it and I decided to make a spreadsheet to do it. Now obviously you do not have to do this, but I just wanted to show you it, and it is a double check on your calculations. So my apologies, this is going to be a little shaky here. So right now I have zeros all the way across here, and I've set this up to calculate based on what's entered for the bottom, measurements across the bottom of the slats, what the middle and top numbers would be. And also over here, I would put in this will calculate whether we're over or under. So we know we have 41 inches, and we are going to try to fill that whole space up with either slats or spaces, depending on what they are. And up here, the whole sheet references this 41 inches of width, and we also have the offset up here. This is the jogs in the slats, so that's the number that we're using. So if we come down here and fill this in, we have a one center slat, which is 3.5 inches, and there is, come on, let's go here. Mouse is being recalcitrant. Give me a second here. Here's a quick tip for you. Sometimes when you have a remote, the battery, what happens is it gets some oxidation between the contacts. If you spin the battery around a little bit, it will often, if it's being recalcitrant or not working at all, come on, it'll often start working if you do that. So that's just a little tip for you. It has nothing to do with the gates. All right, so we got 3.5 inches on the center board. We're gonna have one of those. The pipes are 1/2 inch inside diameter, which means the outside diameter is 5/8, 0.625, and there's 4 of those. The first slat on the bottom is going to be 7.25. There's 2 of those, one on each side. Second slat is 5.25, and again there's 2 of those. There's no third slat at the bottom, so we can ignore that. And then that arrangement gives us, we're shooting for a space of 1 inch, and that gives us 10 inches, 10 spaces rather, I'm sorry. And let's see, if we hit return, what do we get? So it's filled in these other items here, and so we know that those 1 inch jogs here, that as this goes up rather, the middle will be 1 inch narrower, the top will be 2 inches narrower, and so forth. It calculated all these as well. The third slat starts at nothing because it's not down at the bottom, and then we get the other 2 and 4 inches as we go up the different levels. So that works out good. And what I had done is I had done this by hand several times, and kind of got tired of it, so it was worthwhile to spend 20 minutes putting the spreadsheet together. Now, if you don't like the design that I've given you, you can play with it, and that's having the spreadsheet is very nice. So, for example, maybe I don't like the pipes, so I get rid of the pipes. Now and if I get rid of the pipes, that also would reduce the spaces between the slats down to 6 rather than 10. So we're short 6.5 of the 41 we need. So we can start playing with this. For example, maybe we decide to put a 1x8 as the center slat, and that'll get us back to so now we're only 2 3/4 inch down from short of what we want. And what we could do then is make that third slat go all the way to the bottom. We would need to, since there's 2 of them, we would half of that. Half of 2 3/4 is 1 3/8, so that's 1.375. If you don't know the decimal equivalents to the fractions, you can either use your calculator and just divide for example, the 3 by 8, and that gives you 3.75, or you can just look it up on a table. You can just print one off the internet someplace. So, and we put 2 of those in, and that would get us back to 41. So if you want to play with this, and it changes the rest of the third slat widths accordingly. So there's some things you can do. If you want to play with it, you don't like the design that I've given you, by setting the spreadsheet up, you can play with it and get whatever you want. And obviously you do not need to do this. You can just do this by hand. Just as I said, I kept having to do this over and over again, and I got tired of it. So just as a convenience, it was worth the while to take the time to do this. But you don't have to do this. You can just do it by hand if you wish to do so. And you certainly don't need to set this up so that it fills in all the numbers for you. If you want to just do a simple one, you can do that. Just thought I'd show you this. If it's too much trouble for you, then just ignore this whole part of it. And you can use paper for this, but I like to have something a little stiffer. It's easier to trace around. So I picked up some poster board. To cut the pattern out of. And we'll have to tape a couple of these together, I think. Let me see what I want to do here. Let's try something. One side is shinier than the other. I just want to see which side takes the mark better. I think we'll do it on the dull side. And I'm going to tape these together. So I'll put the shiny side up, and we'll just run some tape across that seam there. Goofed up some of the numbers when I laid out the slats on the templates, so kind of ignore what's there. Go back to what we've already talked about, and then at the end of it I will show you pictures of the templates again and explain what the dimensions are at each point. I draw a line across each end at the appropriate point, 62 inches apart, to represent the bottom rail and the top rail between them. So just going to set this arbitrarily in a couple inches from the end. I'm measuring off the seam here because that's the factory edge, not the one I cut. So if there's any discrepancy in the one I cut, it won't throw the line off one way or the other. Set this end on 62. And then make a mark up here. Do the same on the other side. And we'll start laying this out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a line down the side here, the straight edge on here on the edge of the paper. If you lined up the edges pretty good, this should be accurate enough. The template, we'll get it as close as we can. It doesn't have to be dead perfect, because when we cut the pieces out, we're going to leave a little extra material. We're going to cut, leave some margin so that when we shape the sides up, we have a little more room to work, a little bit more material to work with if we need it. So if this is not absolutely totally perfect, it's not going to hurt anything. Is I'm going to come in, first I want to sharpen the pencil, because it certainly helps to have it sharp. That's better. The bottom, let's check the, let's see what I do with my tape measure. So here's a piece of the stock, and this is 1x8, and it should be, if they told us the right thing. Alright, this is coming out 7 1/4. Sometimes 1x8s will measure 7 1/2, but this one's 7 1/4. So what we will do is come in 7 1/4 and make a mark there, and then we will go, I don't know why I keep folding this thing, we will go up, what did we say the bottom was, 30 3/4 to the first mark, first inward curve there. So we'll mark this, we'll put this on 30 3/4 right there, and we'll put a mark there, and again measure in at that point 7 1/4. So we will draw a line up there, and we're going to have a 1-inch gap between the between each of the slats. So I will measure in 1 inch from the line we just drew, and we will go up pencil that in. Okay. 5 1/4 from that second line that I just drew. The line, that line represents the inside edge of the second slat. So we'll draw it, come over here, and we'll come over 5. What did I say? 5 1/4, right? Right. We'll come over 5 1/4. Come up here. 5 1/4. That's 5 1/8. Excuse me. If you don't talk to yourself while you're working, you might as well just forget it, because that's just totally unacceptable. If you can't babble to yourself, you can't babble to anybody. And babbling is a very important part of life, as you all know. So that took care of that. There is a small piece up at the top that we will mark out later as we get down to that end. So we don't have to worry about that, but what we will do is put another line 1 inch in from this, because that line represents the inside of the stile on that side. We're going to go all the way up. So we'll come down 12 inches, make a mark. I'll make a mark in a couple of places. Actually, what I should do is, let's do this. I'm going to go all the way across here with a reference line. So that'll be the 12-inch mark. And let me come down here and do the same thing with the other one. I don't think there's any need to belabor this. I think you get the idea. We're just going to go up through each section and mark the dimensions that we determined, the ones we showed on the spreadsheet. So here we're doing the middle section, and then we'll do the top the same way. All right, so we have all the main lines laid out. Now what we need to do is connect the, put the curves on those two lines that we have there. We could draw these freehand. Not a bad idea to do that. But I think for the sake of keeping it consistent, we will try to do this a little more sophisticated. You know, I fiddle around with compass and some circle templates to try to come up with a transition between these two, between the two sections, and I didn't like the way it looked. The intention of this was to be to have it look kind of natural, more organic. So if you use the instruments, what you get when you go down is you get something that looks like that, with the, you know, the radius is what they are. I didn't really want that, so what I wanted was to come down and sort of transition more like that. So I can't draw this with the drafting implements. I have to do it freehand. What I'm doing is I'm going to cut a small template that I can use to trace these in, and I will kind of design this by hand. So I made two lines here, one 1 inch in, one 2 inches in, and from that point, and if this particular point represented the divisions between the various sections, what I'm going to do is I'm going to freehand this in sort of like that. And my objective, which I just didn't quite make, was to have at the dividing point to have this roughly 1/2 inch out from the line. So now let's redraw that just slightly. So put a nice reverse curve on it and go with that. So let me cut this out and see what it looks like. So have that. What we do to mark this is you would hold this against the two lines. You can see here I'm holding it here, and then just trace it. And then move it up. Keep the reference line on the guideline that we drew across there. Just move it up so that it is lined up with the next two marks, and draw that. And that should keep them 1 inch apart, so it'll keep the gap constant all the way up. The transition from the second to the third slat is a 2 inch offset rather than 1 inch, so I had to make a second template for that. And what I ended up doing was I ended up transitioning 2 inches either side of the jog line, and that's the curve I got. So I just went ahead and cut these out and applied them. So here are the dimensions across the bottom slats. The first one is 7 1/4. We have a 1 inch gap 5 1/4, and another 1-inch gap. And at the bottom, we do not have any third slat, and the bottom section is 30 inches. The bottom section to the first jog is 30 inches, as we calculated earlier. And here's the middle section. The first slat is 6 1/4, the 1-inch gap, 4 1/4 for the second slat, the 1-inch gap, and then at this point we have the third slat coming into play, and that is 2 inches wide at that point. And here's the top. The first slat is 5 1/4, again a 1-inch gap, 3 1/4 for the second one, a gap, and then the third slat is 4 inches across, and the top section is the top jog is 12 inches from the top. So in part 3, what we're going to do is we're going to cut all the materials and do the mortise and tenon joints for the frame of the gate itself. So hope you enjoyed this. As always, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and see you next time.